inside another edition of Land of 10 Live. Sam Radin, former Michigan national champion Chris Howard along my side. A happy man Chris Howard is with the Michigan Wolverines heroics in the NCAA tournament. We got plenty of stuff to cover over the course of the next half hour. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm excited. Wolverines made it, barely, but I'll take it. It's a win.
A win is a win. That might not have been exactly how it was drawn up with Jordan Poole in the 30-footer, but I know you're excited, and I know we're excited as the NCAA tournament rolls on. Plenty more to get to. Before we get you set up with our quick slants, let me just tell you that I reverted back to a tactic I used to have in my older days with my wife. I said, listen, honey, I got to tell you something. I can't go take care of the baby right now. This is a work game. In other words, I can't stop watching the TV, right, because this is a work game. I got to be prepared for Land of 10 Live so that you guys can interact with us and I don't make a fool of myself. At any rate, here's what's coming up on the show today. We will spend some time on the NCAA tournament, as you can see, but before we get to that, more Shea Patterson off the field news. I don't know if this is the kind of look that Patterson wants to be giving to Michigan and before he's even eligible to play at Michigan, but he's in the news, so we'll get Chris's take on that. And if you haven't seen all the back and forth with Johnny Manziel, we'll let you see it right here on Land of 10 Live. After we talk about the NCAA tournament, we do have more spring football. Hard to believe with the Big Ten embroiled in the big dance, but spring football is coming up right around the corner next week at a lot of schools, including University of Michigan, and our viewer engagement. We've got that for you, as always, here on our Land of 10 Facebook page. I look forward to chatting with you guys during the course of the next half hour. So that's what's up. That's what we'll talk about. Shea Patterson, that'll lead us off. Been much ballyhooed. This guy's never played it down at Michigan, but he's certainly in the news a lot, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's obviously the centerpiece for Michigan in their attempts to regain some competitiveness into the Big Ten. So he's obviously going to get a lot of attention. But Shea Patterson, as far as his ruling goes, we don't know what the NCAA is leaning. I'm leaning probably 50-50 right now. As far as I know, the paperwork has been passed back to Ole Miss. They have to give their response, and then we have to wait for the NCAA. But if we're waiting for the NCAA to do the right thing, we could be waiting for a much longer time than we expected.
Well, I wonder, just out of curiosity, I'm putting you on the spot here, but you say 50-50. I mean, I think if you look at fairness, which the NCAA doesn't always look at fairness, to be sure. I got to laugh out loud at you right there. I mean, it would be fair if they made a decision before spring football starts, which is March 23rd for Michigan. But why do you say it's 50-50, and what do you think is the timetable for this?
Well, you pointed out it's the NCAA. That's why I give it 50-50, because when it comes to doing the right thing and being fair when it comes to the student athletes, I have yet to see the NCAA do the right thing. So that's why I give it 50-50. As far as Shea Patterson, listen, they've got Ole Miss on record saying that they misled these kids. So even his attorneys have said that it looks good. It looks like it should be a ruling pretty soon. But again, we're talking about the NCAA. It takes them a long time to come to any kind of decision. So right now, I'm 50-50. I'm kind of on the fence with it.
Well, as far as on the field news, you can't even say it's on the field news because he's not on the field yet, and this is certainly not on the field news either, but the off the field news, as it were, is the tweets he had back and forth with Johnny Manziel. We'll show those to our viewers here. You can take a look at them. I see you laughing. I don't know how Jim Harbaugh feels about this kind of stuff. Here's a guy that hasn't even suited up yet for the Michigan Wolverines, and you get into this type of a, what do they call this? A Twitter beef, right, with Johnny Manziel. Maybe not the guy you want to be compared to in the media. It's good-natured, right, with Michigan taking on Texas A&M in the next round of the NCAA tournament, but there you see the back and forth. Manziel kind of initiating it, and then here you go with Shea Patterson, and then the back and forth, and then the wager, and now we're talking about Johnny Manziel, social media, and wagering, and those are not the words that Jim Harbaugh wants to hear in a sentence, right?
Well, listen, I think it's all good-natured fun. I think Shea Patterson and Johnny Manziel actually have a relationship prior to, especially with camps and stuff like that. I believe they met each other at the Peyton Manning camp. But listen, it's all in good fun. I would be more concerned if Johnny Manziel tweeted Shea Patterson, hey, let's meet out for a drink. I'd be concerned more about that than anything else.
Well, especially because Johnny has, again, recently gotten sober, and again, not the kind of thing you necessarily want to see Shea Patterson doing. I think it's fine. I'm being a little bit condescending and tongue-in-cheek with this. I do think it's fine, although I would be careful that Shea Patterson doesn't get the kind of reputation as being a Johnny Manziel-like kind of guy, or just having too much stuff splashed around social media. But you're right. I mean, at this point, it's good-natured fun, and we'll see which one of these schools prevails. Speaking of prevailing, there'll be even more chatter at the Thanksgiving dinner table between the Harbaugh and Crean families. As you know, Tom Crean, former coach at Indiana, now current coach for the University of Georgia in men's basketball, the brother-in-law of Jim Harbaugh, married to Harbaugh's sister, and the two of them now kind of have a mutual dislike for some folks at Alabama and maybe elsewhere in the SEC. And here's Tom Crean, smack dab in the middle of SEC country, taking this job with Georgia. What do you think about the hire? What do you think about Tom Crean with the Bulldogs and just this whole kind of incestuous relationship with the Harbaugh family in SEC land?
Well, I think this is an outstanding hire for UGA. I mean, Tom Crean is an unbelievable coach. He's an intense coach. I mean, you look at what he did at Indiana. He was able to turn Indiana around from decades of just mismanagement. So right now, I think it's a great hire for Georgia, and I think he'll be a great fit for Georgia as well. Now, obviously, the relationship between Harbaugh and Crean, Harbaugh has done an outstanding job in recruiting Georgia, so this just gives him an excuse to go down to Georgia, visit the family, stop at some high schools, shake some hands, maybe climb some trees, and hopefully get us some more recruits out of Georgia.
Oh, I love it. You don't shake hands and kiss babies anymore, Jim Harbaugh. You shake hands, climb trees, have sleepovers.
That's right.
It's also not much of a secret. There's no love lost between Jim Harbaugh and the football coach at the University of Georgia, and Kirby Smart. That makes for kind of an interesting dynamic as well between that Harbaugh family dinner, right? Again, where you're talking about Crean, who's the basketball coach at the same school, where the football coach is no fan of Harbaugh's and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, this is going to be an exciting time for Michigan and Georgia. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a Georgia-Michigan game somewhere down the line.
Wow, that'd be pretty fun.
Yeah.
You know, I know this, being a Big Ten guy and keeping up with folks in Georgia. Michigan and Georgia haven't played since 1969. Can you believe that? I believe it was Bo's first year that Michigan and Georgia played. That would be fun if that's what comes out of this. I don't know, we'll see. What do you guys think? Why don't you sound off for us here on our Land of 10 Facebook page. Tell us what you think about the hire. Just my one thought on that, I agree with you. Slam dunk hire for Georgia. It's not really fair to say that Tom Crean is a great basketball coach just because what I hear him say when he's on television, but the guy sounds like he's a heck of a basketball coach, and he's a great ambassador for a program. And for Georgia, boy, I thought that Mark Fox had done a pretty good job, but they got a slam dunk hire getting Tom Crean to accept that job and take that job. That's a pretty good move for Georgia. We'll see what that does for the Bulldogs basketball, and the Big Ten's loss, I guess, is the SEC's gain right there. Plenty more NCAA tournament coverage coming up. If you want to make a boatload of money, though, as you get set for this second weekend of March Madness, you can make some big bet winnings on college hoops at mybookie.ag. Use the promo code LAND10 and they'll give you a 50% bonus with your first deposit. Go to mybookie.ag and start playing today. So, it's not today, it's not tomorrow, it's things I tell my daughter, it's not right now, but Thursday, we get back to the NCAA tournament. I used to like it. Sometimes the network would do those little promos earlier in the week when you get into these regional finals, and you just have the theme music. You say, it's coming back, and it is indeed coming back on Thursday. The Big Ten, 2 of the 4 teams advance, including Michigan, who takes on Texas A&M, as we talked about on Thursday night in Los Angeles. Just take us through it, man. Folks want to know, I mean, what was the Howard household like while you were watching the game as Michigan won against Houston on the 30-foot, buzzer-beating, improbable, need you more adjectives, incredible shot by Jordan Poole?
Well, usually when I'm watching any Michigan sport game, I usually start somewhere on the couch. By the time the game is close to being over, I'm about 6 inches away from the screen. Either I'm pacing back and forth, trying to predict the outcome of the game. But I mean, it was exciting. I screamed. I woke up my wife. She shushed me. I got quiet. I just celebrated in my quietness. But it was awesome. I mean, this was a team who's really struggled going into ever since they came out of New York out of the Big Ten tournament. I mean, they shot 28% from three. They shot 39% from the field. So offensively, Michigan has not been a very good team going into the tournament. Now, defensively, I never thought I would say this, but defensively, that's what's kept Michigan in the game. I think Rob Gray was 8 for 22 from the field, even though he did get 20 points. But Michigan tried to limit his touches and made him really uncomfortable when he was going into the paint. But I mean, you got to credit the Wolverines. They came out with a win, a very miraculous win, but it's still a win, and they move forward to Texas A&M.
Realistically, when Michigan's inbounding the ball, right, with 3.6 seconds, is that what it was? How realistic a shot did you give them to win that game right there? Or at least take it to overtime?
You know what? Once I saw that they didn't put a guy on the ball, and I saw them run the same similar play that they ran against against Illinois, that allowed us to go into overtime and win that game, my confidence went up to about 65%.
65%? Wow.
Listen, man, anything can happen in March Madness. Anything can happen.
This is why they always tell you to put a guy on the ball, right? Exactly. Christian Laettner.
Thank you, Houston. We appreciate that.
Jordan Poole in the lore of NCAA. Well, the other team from the Big Ten that's still playing is the Purdue Boilermakers. Maybe a little bit improbable for them, too, as they lose Isaac Haas, their 7'2" center in their first round game, advance through that game, and then survive against Butler to keep fighting. But Purdue feels a little bit compromised right now without Isaac Haas in the lineup.
Yeah, definitely. They're going to have to make some adjustments, and they did make some adjustments against Butler. They decided to play a little bit of small ball. But I think with Haas not being in there, that allows them to get a lot more dribble drive penetration, because Haas is not there to really clog up the middle. Purdue is a great three-point shooting team. If they can drive and dish and still continue to be hot from the three-point range, Purdue will be fine. Also, they need Matt Harm to really get out there and contribute in place of Isaac Haas. But I still think Purdue is still a dangerous team. I'm not too worried about Haas not being there. But I mean, again, they did make a good adjustments against Butler, and I think they'll do the same thing moving forward.
You know, it's interesting about Harms. You talk about, and maybe he's a better defensive player than Haas, and they function differently as a perimeter team without Haas in there. Vincent Edwards had a great game. They've got great shooters. Dakota Mathias, we know about what they can do from the perimeter. Now they take on a team in Texas Tech who has really, maybe for my money, one of the best players in the tournament in Evans. So we'll have to see if Purdue has enough to get through that next game. It's a shame, because this was really one of the better Purdue teams on paper, and now again they have this setback going through the NCAAs. I tried to do this for you last week, and I know we want to talk about the teams that are eliminated, but I thought of a way to try to better get you to answer the question. This is what I do all week, is try to find ways to pin you down on stuff. Yeah, don't rub it in. At any rate, here's what it is. Which one of the two teams, Michigan or Purdue, is more likely to be playing next week? You can answer that, right?
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. You know, and again, this is not to be biased, but I think Michigan will be the team that prevails in that scenario, because I think they're due to have a really good offensive game. Again, they haven't been shooting the ball really well. They've been playing defense. They need to get back to being a very balanced team, like they were at the end of the season, like they were in the Big Ten tournament. If they can achieve that, then Michigan is a very hard team to beat, simply because they can spread the floor and they can score.
Well, and the #1 seed in the West region, right? Xavier is out.
Xavier's out.
So that's not a hurdle for Michigan. Now, Gonzaga, who knocked out Ohio State, which is a nice segue for us here to some of the teams that are out, they are still in that West region. That might be the other team that Michigan has to face. Gonzaga would have to get through Florida State, who knocked off Xavier first. I'm pretty good on my brackets right now, and I had a lot of coffee before the show started. Let's talk about Ohio State, though, before we get to Michigan State. Just quickly on Ohio State, probably a good season, maybe better than people would have expected. They played Gonzaga pretty close, but I don't think anyone was disappointed to see Ohio State go out where they did.
I mean, listen, this was a season for Ohio State that, I mean, many people if you were in Ohio, lived in the state of Ohio, then yeah, you probably have some bias. You thought this team was going to be great, but everyone outside of the state of Ohio didn't see this coming. And for Diop to be Offensive Player of the Year, to the things that Ohio State has achieved this year, I mean, you can't hold your head down, because this was a team that no one expected much from, and they still achieved a lot, getting this far into the conference play.
All right, let's turn our attention to Michigan State, and let me bring it back to do that with something you said before about Michigan and maybe the layoff from the Big Ten tournament. Could this be part of what's going on with Michigan State, that they never really got into the rhythm that they would have had they been still playing a little bit closer to the time of the tournament, had the Big Ten tournament not been moved up, or is it something else? Why didn't it click for Michigan State?
Listen, when you got a lot of guys who, they're high-ranked guys, they're still trying to gel. You got some young guys that are kind of coming in, like Jaren Jackson, who's still trying to learn how to play Izzo's system, and he gets in foul trouble a lot. He spent most of the game on the bench. I believe he only played 15 minutes. So, but also, you can't put everything on the players. Tom Izzo is a Hall of Fame coach, and he has to be able to make adjustments. It's not like you didn't know Syracuse was going to run a zone at some point. That's what Syracuse does. And Michigan State, once they saw the zone, it just seemed like they never could figure it out. They didn't have the right guys in the right position to even to beat the zone. So, Izzo, just like with Beeline has evolved. He understood that he couldn't do everything. I think Tom Izzo is in the same situation where he has to figure out, hey, listen, what am I doing? How can I get better as a coach? Because you're getting too much talent to be knocked out in first weekends and not make it as far as Michigan State has, especially given the type of talent that they have.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I think you can't talk about what happened to Michigan State without giving Syracuse some credit, right, with that zone. But you're also right that people know what's coming, that Tom Izzo should have known when he saw Syracuse as the team that Michigan State was going to have to play, that would be what they would expect. And there should be an adjustment. Yeah, there's only 2 days between the first round game and the second round game, or the round of 64 game and the round of 32 game. But what does this say about Tom Izzo? This is 3 straight years with eminently talented teams that he hasn't got to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. I don't think he forgot how to coach. But what is it? Could it be some of the off-the-field stuff that's going on? Could it be having these young kind of one-and-done kids? Because Jaren Jackson's not playing another game at Michigan State. I can promise you that. He's going to be a top 3 pick in the NBA draft. Could you put your finger on something with Izzo, with the direction of the program?
I think it's all of the above. I think it's some of the distractions. I think it could be part of the layoff. I think it also could be part of Izzo and his lack of inability to make second half adjustments. I think all those things play into it. Sometimes when you have so much talent, you rely on that talent to be better than the other team. And I think with Izzo, he's going to have to have a heart-to-heart with himself and do a lot of soul searching and understand that talent alone is not going to beat teams. That's just not going to happen. And I think that's proven the last few years when he's had really talented teams. And this is supposed to be his most talented team in the Izzo era. So, I know the Spartan fans are disappointed, and rightfully so. You just hate to see them go out like this. But, again, it's kind of on coaching at this point.
Let me give you this. No one would have believed you had you told them that when Michigan beat Louisville and Rick Pitino last year, that Rick Pitino would never coach another game at Louisville, or probably ever again in the NCAA. I'm not telling you for sure, and it's not going to be for the same reason. I'm not positive that Tom Izzo is back coaching Michigan State next year.
Wow.
I think that the off-the-field stuff, the pressure, the scandal, the emotional ties he had to this team. I got 2 things out there for our listeners. This with Tom Izzo, and I said, you look out for Purdue so long as Brahm is still the head coach on the football team, that they could sneak out there in the Big Ten West. I'm putting those 2 things on record. You want to sound off, you put it right there on Land of 10 Live.
That's a bold move, Cotton.
Yeah. Oh.
A little movie reference for you.
Thank you, sir. This is Land of 10 Live. You can check us out every Tuesday, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central, or on demand anytime right here on our Land of 10 Facebook page. Let's talk about some spring football here. I know we want to talk NCAA football. I know we talked about some of the stuff that's going on off the field with Michigan, but let's spend a little time here rolling up our sleeves. And you got the guns, I just got the whatever. Anyway, we're talking about what we can look forward to here in spring football. Here's a few storylines that the bigwigs on the other side of the glass thought of. Let's talk about it a little bit in the context of the entire league. What team is the most hyped up going into next season in the Big Ten?
In the Big Ten. Well, that's easy. That's got to be Nebraska. Right now, Nebraska has so much hype around them and Scott Frost and everything that he's doing. The $634 spring game tickets. I mean, a lot of hype is around Scott Frost right now, and again, it's warranted. You look at what he's achieved at UCF. You look at his coaching resume. Nebraska fans are excited. Everyone's excited in the state of Nebraska and what he's bringing to the table. So right now, I'd have to say Nebraska is probably the most hyped team in the Big Ten right now.
I mean, that's a good call, but just because I can't agree with you. No, I mean, I think Ohio State is probably a pretty fair answer to this question as well. When you look at the amount of talent that they return, particularly on the offensive side of the football with those two excellent running backs coming back in Dobbins and Weber, and the fact that I think a lot of people, myself included, think that Dwayne Haskins is going to be the quarterback for this team next year because of the performance he had in the Michigan game, because of how groomed he was all of last season. I think Ohio State's going to be preseason top 5, like they are, it seems, just about every year under Urban Meyer. We talked about it with their recruiting prowess and how well they and Penn State distance themselves from the rest of the Big Ten. It's hard to go into any season. I know you don't like this as a Michigan guy. It's hard to go into any season and say that Ohio State is not the most hyped up team going into spring camp.
Well, I look at it a little bit different because, hype is one thing, but when we're talking about Ohio State, you're talking about a proven track record. With Ohio State, you understand and you know why they're going to be one of the top-ranked teams in the country. With Nebraska, there's a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of excitement around the program now. So when you're talking about on a national stage and a national coach like Scott Frost and what he brings to the table, there is a lot of expectation, not just from the fans, but from the alumni, and a lot of recruits are looking around, are looking at Nebraska to see what's going to happen in Scott Frost's first year. So as far as hype goes, hype without the accolades, I'd have to go with Nebraska.
I see what you did. You looked at the definition of the word. This is what they tell us in law school. Words have meaning. And here again, you rub it in my face that I ought to know better.
It's okay.
I got you. I see what you did there. One quick thing on Nebraska here before we turn the page. Have you seen some of this with the conditioning? And we know this is that, voluntary/involuntary conditioning in the offseason. A couple players have been hospitalized, and then we've had other reports about how successful it's been. What do you make of what's going on there in Lincoln?
Well, they got to be careful. Anytime you bring a new coach into a system, the first thing they want to see is who's tough, who's mentally tough, who's physically tough, and sometimes that can work in your detriment when you really overwork the kids because you're trying to establish a culture. So it's just something that they have to keep their eye on. They have to be careful about, make sure kids are dehydrated and that they're not pushing them too hard beyond their limits. But I think for the most part, I think it's fine. Scott Frost took responsibility for it, and I think it's something that they'll keep an eye on moving forward.
All right, let's switch gears here and talk again kind of one of these overarching spring football questions. We look at some of the players that left the Big Ten last year, and I know we got the NFL draft coming up, what we'll be talking about in the next few weeks, but who's the player that left the biggest shoes to fill? Who's got the most pressure on him to step into the shoes of someone else and perform right away in the Big Ten?
Man, I got to go with Saquon Barkley, and the guy that's got to step up and take his place is Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is a very capable running back. He's very good, highly recruited kid. Coming into James Franklin's class, I think he'll do really well. But it's going to be really hard to replace that kind of production that you got from Saquon Barkley, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on Trace McSorley to really go out and establish himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten as well. So as far as big shoes to fill, there are no bigger shoes to fill than Saquon Barkley. Miles Sanders has to step up and be that guy. He is capable of being a 1,000-yard back, but again, to replace a Saquon Barkley, a once-in-a-generation type athlete, that's going to be hard.
Can you compare their running styles a little bit and talk about what Sanders gives that Barkley maybe did or didn't have?
Sanders, he's not as big as Barkley. Barkley, obviously, 230 plus pounds. Runs low 4.4s, almost a 4.3. So speed, size, but Miles Sanders, he's no slouch. He can still run. He runs physical. He has great vision. So they're not losing a lot, but they're losing enough that they'll miss those home run plays, because anytime Saquon Barkley touches the ball, he can take it to the house. Miles Sanders will probably rip off a 50, 60-yarder and probably get caught.
Well, you know what that's like, right?
Yes, I do.
I had to do that to you back again. That was the Hula Bowl days.
Hula Bowl, man.
Yeah. A couple too many of those luau's there.
Didn't man.
Oh, wow. I didn't know those were involved. I'll tell you what, I don't want to get this reputation. I'm just going with all the Ohio State guys. But what about J.T. Barrett's shoes? I mean, maybe the most accomplished quarterback in the history of the Big Ten. And now we've talked about this controversy. Is it going to be Haskins? Is it going to be Joe Burrow or Tate Martell? Which one of these guys is going to step into those shoes and follow in the footsteps of J.T. Barrett? Whoever it is, and I think it'll be Haskins, I'm not so sure that that's the job that you want, is to inherit maybe the most prolific player in the history of the Big Ten's job and then have to run that fine-tuned offense to try to do it as well as this guy did. Boy, that's a tough job. They got a lot of talent to do it, but that's some pretty big shoes to fill right there. So we'll keep an eye on the quarterback position at Ohio State. Speaking of, stick with the quarterbacks at Ohio State. Compare those quarterbacks to Michigan, and we don't know because of Shea Patterson. Right. Who's got the more talented group in the quarterback room right now?
You know what? I'd have to go with Ohio State simply because, I was able to see what Dwayne Haskins Jr. was able to do against Michigan. He came into that game cool, calm, and collective, like he was like he was a veteran, and threw strikes and played in one of the biggest games. His first game, he plays in the big house in front of 100,000+ people, and it didn't faze him at all. He was cool. He was calm. He made great throws, great reads. He ran the ball extremely well. So I have to give Ohio State the edge there, just simply because I've seen what he's capable of doing. If I look at the Michigan quarterback room, it's a great quarterback room, but it's still an unproven quarterback room, and we still don't know what we have. Even with Shea Patterson coming in, we don't know what we'll have. Is he recovered? Is he fully recovered from his injury? Will he be eligible? We just don't know.
It's kind of crazy to think, right, when you look at who's we know is eligible right now, that as far as the on-the-field experience, the Michigan quarterbacks, I mean, it's not because they have a lot, but just by comparison, right? They run circles around the experience that the Ohio State quarterbacks have, whether that's Brandon Peters or if it was Shea Patterson, if he does wind up being eligible. And the Ohio State guys are kind of unknown commodities, but we know what their potential was coming out of the high school ranks.
Yeah, well, that, and also with Ohio State's offense, with Ohio State's offense, they have so many weapons at so many different positions that the position doesn't require the quarterback to have to make a lot of plays. You just have to play within the offense, because you got guys like Weber, you got guys like Dobbins, you got outstanding tight end and wide receiver play. You don't have to put everything on your shoulders as a quarterback at Ohio State, because you got guys that can make plays. At Michigan, we don't know what we have at the wide receiver position or at the quarterback position.
I'm surprised that some of these folks on our Land of 10 Facebook page didn't half pay attention, say, oh, well, Sam predicted that Tom Izzo is going to get fired, and Chris said that Michigan's going to the Final Four, but you guys are being responsible watchers today. We didn't get any of that on our Land of 10 Facebook page yet, but we'll monitor that. And we'll keep an eye on that as we come up for next week's show, where we'll have plenty more spring coverage. We'll talk about the Final Four. We'll see if the Big Ten is lucky enough to have a team in there. And speaking of the Final Four, I'm going to call out you and you on the other side of the glass. It's only Nate, the audio guy, that had the temerity to battle me in an online prediction for this year's Final Four. Well, guess what? He picked North Carolina to win it. I had Arizona in the Final Four. But I had Michigan over Michigan State, so I could still potentially get the champion right. Shout out to you, Nate, for getting in there to compete. We'll see how that shakes out. We'll keep an eye on it. Good stuff. All right, thanks to the guys on the other side of the glass. For Chris, I'm Sam. It's been Land of 10 Live right here on the Land of 10 Facebook page.